Nick has always been our biggest supporter, and I am so proud and pleased and happy to introduce Nick Vandergragt.
Yeehaw!
Well, apparently Beth thinks I'm supposed to be funny. I don't know how that's going to be
Yes,
possible.
you are.
Does anybody need to stand up and stretch? Because I live by the rule, the mind can only absorb, but the bottom can endure. So if you want to stand up and have a quick stretch, go ahead. I'll be back in an hour. I give them a chance. If they don't take it, what am I supposed to do? Actually, my daughter came in the other room, came in the kitchen. I don't know if I told this on the radio or not, but she's about 10 years old. And she is our drama queen. I've never met a young lady in all the children that I've ever known in my life who can go from one extreme to the other faster than this young lady can. And she walked into the kitchen, and I'm standing next to the kitchen table, which is 4 feet wide by 11 feet long. And I'm standing there, and she puts her hands on her hips, and she goes, "Dad?" I said, "Yes, sweetheart. What can I do for you?" She said, "You'll do." And she turned and she walked up the stairs. To this day, I don't know what I'll do for, but apparently I'll do. So I hope you have that kind of an attitude with me this afternoon. You think I'm kidding. I'm dead serious. That's the thing about this little girl, is we took her to a place, well, we took the whole herd. See, I don't refer to my children as children. It's a herd. There's 8 of them, and then we have 1, 2, 3. Well, we have a foster child. We have my niece lives with us. By the time we get done with all the gazintas, there's about 14 or 15 of us for supper. Okay, if my son's home, then there's 25 because he eats for the rest. You ever see a kid? Oh man, if you've got more than 2 kids, you know what I mean. Vacuum cleaners on legs, man. I swear the boy has a hinge in his neck. Because when you walk down the buffet line, you better be in front of him because there's a huge sucking sound coming behind you, and there's nothing left. No rice, no peas, no nothing. Anyway, so we all piled into the cattle car. And we went down to the. Are you going to use a cattle car? How else are you going to ship that many people? Anyway, we go down to this place. It's down near Combermere. It's called Crooked Slide Park, and it's the cheapest, most wonderful water park you've ever been to. That's because it's free. And it's also got a little chute where the water comes down about 10 or 15 feet over top. Then the excess water runs down a little rapid over here. And there's a big pool, and the kids are playing in it, and they are having a ball. For 2 hours, we let them turn into raisins, right? And they come out, and they're shivering and they're freezing. And she goes, "Dad, I have never had so much fun in my life. My fun meter is full. It's broken, it's so full. It's way up full." Great. So we're going to go up the road a little bit to a place called Gorman Lake, and I've got the boat in the back and the motor. I'm going to give little boat rides. I want to make sure my motor works, so when I go fishing it actually works, and I figured this is a good excuse. So we get out there, I put the boat in the lake, I put the motor on the back, and bleh, bleh, bleh. 20 minutes later, my arm feels like it's this big around, the thing won't start. Now I'm mad. So I throw the boat back in the thing, everybody back in the truck. So we all jump back in the truck, and she goes, "Dad, you have no idea how much not fun I didn't have today." What? She said, "You don't know what it's like to go through life with no fun at all." I think, wait a minute, 20 minutes ago, your fun meter was up here. So she tends to be real hill and valley. Why I'm talking about her, I haven't got the foggiest idea. But just the joys of family life. If you've got more than 1.5 kids, and my apologies to the half, the kids are a fantastic reason. They're the center of our lives. And the reason I actually do mention them is because that's what we're here for. I'm going to tell you a quick story. How many people know of a guy called Belcher? It's not what you do when you've had too much. He's actually a Canadian person in Canadian history. He was a navigator, he was a sailor, and a military man. And up in the northwest, in the Queen Charlotte, not the Queen Charlotte Islands, around Ellesmere Island, in the Northern Islands, there's a passage through the islands that's named after him because he helped chart all that area. He was also with the British Navy. A lot of Canadians, before we had our own, would sign up when they wanted to go to sea with the Royal Navy. And he was with the British Navy when they were fighting the Cantonese over in the area that became Hong Kong. His job that day was to chart a course up the Cantonese River, or the Canton River, sorry, because it had never been done before, and the British tend to have big, heavy ships. They didn't know where the sandbars were, they didn't have engines, so they couldn't afford to get stuck. So he charted a course up there, and he was also supposed to find a whole bunch of ships, flat-bottom ships, that they could carry the troops and supplies up the river to take on the Cantonese army. Great. He gets up there, just to give you the mindset of this guy, have you ever seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia? Kind of like that, right on the edge, right? So anyway, he gets there, he sets everything on fire he doesn't need, and then he thinks, oh wait, I should get up into that crow's nest and look around and see if I can spot the Cantonese army. So he finds the biggest one on fire, climbs to the top, looks around, there they are, gets down, scurries across the deck, jumps onto the jetty and starts to run, and the thing goes boom, blows up. He's no more than 50 or 60 yards away. But because he did that, and he also threw the guns off the cliff that were guarding the place, the British Army was allowed to float up, take on the Cantonese Army, and win that battle, and that's why Hong Kong became a British colony. All because of one crazy Canuck who didn't know enough to stay the heck off the top of a burning ship. Okay, now another fella, 4 years old, 1794, in Halifax. His father is the Queen's Harbour Master, or what becomes the Queen's Harbour Master. He's the chief clerk and he looks after all the shipping in and out of the harbour. Okay? His dad enrolls him in the Navy at 4 years old. Now, on paper only, of course. They didn't have disposable diapers in those days, so sending a kid to sea at 4 was not a really good idea. So every time a ship would come in, on paper he'd move his son to that particular crew because he knew they would have some leave and have some time before the ship would have to go to sail. When it was ready to sail, he'd move him off that ship and put him on the next. And he did that for about 8 years. 8 years. He was 10 years old when he finally went to sea. But he had 6 or 7 years seniority on everybody else in his age group. Okay, smart father. So now the boy is 18. It's 1812. If I got my math right, if I'm not about the years, don't worry about it. Anyway, the Chesapeake and the Shannon, famous duel off Boston in the War of 1812. The Chesapeake is, now which one's British? I can't remember. Chesapeake I think is the British, and the Shannon, we got it the other way around? Okay. See, these guys know their stuff better than I do. So the Shannon is off the coast of Boston, and for about a week, the captain drills the crew on gunnery, on making sure they can actually hit their target. They take into account the roll of the ship, recoil, trains them so they'll load faster, that kind of thing. And he's been challenging the captain of the Chesapeake the whole time, saying, come on out, let's you and me go at it. Because the British haven't had any success to this point in the war. Long story short, Chesapeake comes out, Shannon thumps the daylights out of it. You ever heard that saying, don't abandon the ship? It was from the captain of the American ship. He was mortally wounded during the fight. And as they're carrying him down below, oh, give up the ship. Anyway, in the fight, the captain of the Chesapeake is also injured and turns command over to this young gentleman, this lieutenant. So they take the Chesapeake in tow, tow it back into Halifax, and the king puts his stamp on it, and it serves until 1827. Then they turn it into build it, take it apart, and turn it into an Anglican church, and it's still there. It's one of the oldest churches in North America. You can still go and see all the wood from the original Chesapeake. That gentleman goes on to serve in the Navy. He retires as a rear admiral and dies 2 weeks short of his 101st birthday. That's 96 years in uniform. Now, you want to talk about somebody who understands service and sacrifice. In those days, they didn't have the wealthy pensions as a lot of people have today. Now, why do I mention these guys? Because we are engaged today in the same kind of struggle. You see, it is my conviction that when you win a war, the fight for peace begins. It doesn't end when the enemy signs the documents of surrender. In World War II, World War I, at the Treaty of Versailles, we thought the war was over. Okay, the war to end all wars. And the whole world went into this idea, well, almost the whole world. There were a few exceptions. But the Western world said, we don't have to field these huge armies. We don't have to float these huge navies. We don't have to build this new thing called an air force. We can take all the money we were putting into that and give it back to ourselves and have a party. And for about 20 years they did. Until this guy called Hitler came along. And he said, you guys are weak and soft. I want to rule the world. So what happened was, because we had decided that all the fighting was over, we have peace now, we stopped defending it. The fighting for peace it happens on the battlefield, but it doesn't end there. It happens in the very daily things that you engage in every single day. Why is it that we're in the mess we're in today? I'm skipping way ahead. We've gone through World War II because the same thing happened in World War II. During the 20s and 30s, there was this guy called Churchill, who I'm the world's biggest fan of, was going, pay attention to Germany, pay attention, look, pay attention. And they went, no big deal. France got a huge army, we got a huge navy, we're fine. Germany, in the meantime, had a deal with Russia, of all countries, to rebuild their air force and teach the Russians how to fly. That went really well. Then they also had, they kept their pilots alive in the civilian airline called Lufthansa. They were doing all kinds of things behind the scenes, and eventually, because the West never stood up and said, no, like you're supposed to do with your kids, no, you can't do that. They could have stopped Hitler half a dozen times in the late 1930s, and there would have been no World War II, had they moved on him then. But because they were still in this idea of prosperity and peace dividend and all that sort of thing, we ended up in the world's biggest conflagration we've ever seen, or conflagration. So, because of that, every time a war ends, we take a holiday. The problem is the bad guys don't. You see, when you beat communism, socialism, fascism, all the different horrible isms that are out there, they don't hear it. They don't hear the word, you were defeated. Go home. Change your ways. What they hear is, we beat you for now. Go home, learn, get smarter. Do it different next time. They don't try to take our freedoms away anymore with rifles and jackboots. They do it now by making you feel comfortable, by keeping you in a fuzzy, feel-good world, by inoculating you with addicting you to your own money, by taking programs that, how could we ever have done without all-day daycare? What is the matter with us? How come everybody doesn't have a retirement plan? You know who came up with the idea that you have to retire at 65? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but that came from Otto von Bismarck. He was the world's first socialist leader. Okay, and he said, we're going to pick 65 because nobody's going to live that long anyway. So we'll promise them, I'm not kidding, he said we'll promise them that at 65 there'll be a pension because most of them will be dead by then. Once that gets into people's heads, it's stuck. So as our life expectancy began to creep upward and we got past age 65, now people are living well into their 80s, 90s and beyond, all of a sudden it's a huge problem. Because well-intentioned program maybe, but look at what we have to deal with today. So these kinds of things happen because we take time off. We think, and I'm talking about the royal we here, we think we won, therefore it's over. What we should be thinking, we won, we have to maintain it. We simply cannot take a holiday. Look at City Hall. How many times the Needle Exchange Program? Insight. You run down the list. We think we beat them. Sex education with Dalton McGuinty 2 years ago. Remember? No, you're not doing that. Okay. Guess what's in the schools now? Nova Scotia. The Auditor General wants more accountability out of homeschoolers. I want more accountability out of the Auditor General. Because if you guys have listened to me at all, you know I homeschool, my wife homeschools, I get to be principal, which I like. Because that way when I need work done, recess! But Dad, I'm not done my math! Too bad. But I don't want a sociocrat out there dictating to me, and by me I mean anybody else, because if I have that right, so do you, how I'm going to raise my family, how I'm going to educate my kids, or what they're going to believe in. I don't want that because they're lousy at it to begin with. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this mess. Now, the single best way that we can fight is not only to have groups like this. This group, as much as I'm proud of it, as much as I'm proud of my association with it, is, I don't want to say a failure, but it's a result of a failure of those who have gone before us to do their due diligence and make sure these groups are not necessary. Because let's face it, it's Grey Cup weekend. I mean, it's a Saturday. You could be home doing 1,000 things. If we as a people, as a society and as a culture, took freedom seriously, we wouldn't need to be here. So the way to fight back now is not only to do the kinds of things that these things do, and it's having Sun Media and all that, and I'm really glad that, believe me, they've raised profiles all over the country. So I want to salute Sun Media. Well done, not just Brian, but everybody there. But the best thing you can do for you and for your kids and to teach your kids to do is when someone breaks faith with us, fire them. When you go to the ballot box, fire them. If Dalton McGuinty says, I will not raise your taxes, but I will not cut them either, and he does, fire him. And by him, I mean anybody who makes promises you know they can't keep. You know, so saying a politician will promise you a bridge, even where there's no river. Don't elect the guy in the first place. And if he does get elected, you better demand the bridge. He promised it. If he breaks his promise, you'd only have to do that 2 or 3 times before the politicians of the day will go, holy crap, look what happened to Buddy Fred. He promised him the moon, and he couldn't even give him, you know, a handful of mud. And where is he now? You wouldn't have the corruption in Montreal. You wouldn't have the corruption in Ottawa. You wouldn't have the corruption in Queen's Park or on the Hill if people just took it seriously. I had a young lady today, a bunch of these kids were over getting ready. My wife is getting ready for 2 parades today. We have an equine business at home, and they're promoting it in these 2 different parades. One's in Barry's Bay, the other one I think is in Pembroke tonight. Anyway, one of the girls that was there, she's, I don't know, 10, she goes to a French immersion school. And she started talking about this little song that they sing. We have to sing it once a year. I said, what little song? And she said, well, I'm not sure, but somebody way back said that we couldn't speak French anymore. I said, how far back? She said, way, way back. I said, you talking about a guy called James Wolfe? She wasn't sure. And I said, well, if it is him, he never said that. And she said, well, I don't know who it was, but somebody said we couldn't speak French anymore. I said, let me tell you with no uncertainty that that has never been the case in Canada. No one has ever, to anybody of any language group, said you cannot speak that here. The British were the first ones that I know of to allow a conquered people to keep their language, their culture, their heritage, their religion. And I think that's something we should be very proud of. Because the French certainly have contributed to our history and our culture tremendously in the building of this country. I'm half French myself, you can tell because I talk too much in my head. But the point I'm making is, even at that age, she's, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, they're already beginning to mess with their heads. This is why education is so vital. It's why we pulled our kids out of school. Now, if it's not for you guys, I'm not trying to promote homeschooling, I'm just saying it's why we did it. Because we want to make sure that our kids are well-grounded, they can think critically and in a linear sense, so that when they're presented with information that is a little less than accurate, they can say, wait a minute. And even if they don't come to the same conclusion that you and I would, at least they've got logic and reason working for them, and they can put 2 and 2 together and realize what they're being told is not the same thing as reality. It's like the difference between a rainstorm and somebody peeing on your boots telling you it's raining. There's a difference. How many people don't know? You walk down through any grocery store, stop a kid and say, where did that piece of meat come from? The grocery store. There's a total disconnect. No, that was a living, breathing animal, you know, 90 days ago. And we eat them. That's okay. But they think it comes from the grocery store. There's a huge disconnect in our culture and in our society. So to get back more on topic as far as things like this is concerned, the best way to fight is to recognize that there's only, you get one chance, really. You can certainly force change in between, but it's a lot harder. Look at the fight they had down in Stormont Dundas. Look at the fight that Tom Black and the landowners have all over the province. You want to talk about another group I'm proud of. Holy smokes, the work that they've done in the last 5 or 7 years is stunning. The difference they've made in thousands of lives all across this province and even the country is without equal for an organization of that size and of that character. These guys, they need, I can't say enough about them. I don't want to give Tom a fat head because he's coming up next. Or shortly. And I don't want to rob him of what he's going to say. But the bottom line here, folks, is you want a free country? The fight doesn't end when the guns go silent. That's when the fight begins. Because that's when the other guys go home, lick their wounds, and figure out how to beat you next time. Because for them, it's never over. And you ever see 2 guys in a fight where one quits but the other doesn't? The fight isn't over, is it? Just because one guy quits. That's what's wrong with the peace movement. Oh, no more weapons, no more. Yeah, well, tell that to the guy who's pointing one at me. You want me to put mine down? Are you crazy? You know, you get him to put his down first. And until then, I'm going to make sure I can defend myself. And it's the same thing true with this mental attitude we have to have. One more just little story about sacrifice. Just to give you an idea. Because we all have to pay a price. Sooner or later, life will demand of you a price. And you are going to be asked to pay that price or stand down. There was a gentleman He was a surgeon with the Canadian, I can't remember his name. He was in the Canadian Army. He was from Newfoundland. And he's fighting in World War I near Jerusalem against the Turks. Now, there are those who may say this guy wasn't very smart, but I'll tell you what, he was courageous. Every officer and NCO down to the sergeant level had been killed in his unit. They had gone down a little ravine and got ambushed. So the NCO looked at him and said, you got to get a message back, don't send any more reinforcements, give us covering fire so we can get out. Okay, he runs up the top, he gets shot, he falls back down. Shakes himself off, gets up, runs back to the top of the berm again, boom, down he goes again. Now he's getting mad. Why you never pick a fight with a newfie? This time he gets over the berm. He's running, boom, down he goes. And he stays there until dark. They go to get him, they recover he's not dead, but they get him back. He has been shot 8 times, and he wouldn't quit. That's the kind of determination, that's the kind of sacrifice that built this country, and that's the kind of thing. Now fortunately, I hope that none of you ever have to tread a battlefield, at least not one where there's bullets. We're all on a battlefield of some kind. But are we willing to be that committed to the cause? Are we willing to look at our neighbor and say, you know something, there's something wrong here, and we need to do something about it? Are we willing to look at our kids and teach them, at whatever level they're at, about not only our history, but the fight that's going on now? Because our history is important, we can learn from it, but it's not now. Those are heroes and fights from bygone days that we can draw from. But the fight going on now is the one that we have to worry about. We have to worry about the Justin Trudeaus of the world. We have to worry about the Barack Obamas of the world. We have to worry about the Dalton McGuinty's of the world. You know, these guys are the ones who are our opponents. And these guys are the ones we must politically defeat at every opportunity and every turn, no matter how long it takes, no matter the cost. And as Winston Churchill would say, never surrender, never surrender, never, never, never surrender, no matter how the cost, no matter the strength of the enemy or the power of his weapons, never surrender. Thank you.